And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here with yet another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. And today, Chant will not be with us. Unfortunately, she has an upper body injury and should be back in the lineup for our next show. But unfortunately, she won't be here today. But we do have a guest today, and I'm going to bring him on shortly. And of course, after we wrap up, you can see from the promos that we've got some additional news to talk to, which is, I think, is important to get to. But rather than keep our special guest today waiting around, we're going to get right to him. And that is 3D artist Erik Stitt. He's going to be talking about his UFO experiences and his UFO art. And we're going to have to keep this going a while because we've got some samples of Erik's art that you can take a look at. You'll be able to go to his website. We're going to put the website address in the description and go check that out. He's doing some fabulous stuff. So, Erik, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
Better than I deserve, Frank.
Fantastic. So, Erik, Chant kind of turned me on to you and your work, and I have to admit it's fabulous. You've taken the 3D stuff a lot further than I was ever able to do, but at least we can have an intelligent conversation about the software and a little bit about the art. So, basically, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved in the art, and how you got over into the 3D.
Well, okay. Well, I was born a military brat. My dad was in the Navy at the time when I was born and stationed in Long Beach, California. And so that's where I was born in 1966 in Long Beach, California. And he did a few years in that and then got out and transferred over into the Air Force and Air Force Reserve. Coupled with a career in the California Department of Parks and Recreation. And so with those two jobs he had, you can imagine we moved around a lot. And so I was always the new kid in school and bounced around all over. But I'd say my formative years and my most impressionable years were in the Mojave Desert. My dad was stationed outside of Victorville, Edwards Air Force Base. And I finished up my growing up and did a stint in the military myself. And for all that, I was doodling and drawing, sometimes on my school desk, sometimes in the textbooks, and the iconic Peachy folder doodles all through high school and art classes in high school. And so I've known that I've been a very creative person from a very, very young age and knew exactly who and what I was. And just been pretty much relentless with it ever since. And go ahead.
A lot of people are creative, but not everybody who's creative has some actual talent. And we're getting into the examples of your work. And did you have any training? I mean, are you just kind of self-taught? How did all this come about?
It's a kind of a mishmash of things. My mom was a fine artist. She passed away back in 2003 at age 56 from lupus. But she was a renowned Southwest artist and appeared in many magazines, covers of magazines, and was the president of the San Bernardino County Fine Arts Association for several years. And she kind of took my younger brother and I and really didn't give us a lot of choice as to whether or not we were going to become artists. She would throw pencils and paints on the table and set up still lifes and say, draw what we see, and then critique it and give us pointers and this and that. And it just really stuck with me. I liked it. I've never been very good at articulating my words with others because of some kind of birth issues I've had with my mental abilities. But my purest voice, my most true voice, has always been my art. I could speak perfectly and clearly with pictures exactly what I want to say and what I feel. And that just kind of has always been the foundation for everything that I do. And the images never run out. They're always there. I never not have something to create.
And what led to the transition from the old school, pen or paints and ink or canvas or whatever the case may be, and over into the digital realm?
Well, that is that was a fight. I was a bit of a luddite. I didn't want to make that transition when I was growing up. I loved illustration art, and to this day, my great heroes of illustration were traditional artists like Drew Struzan. I mean, everybody knows who Drew Struzan's work is, what his work is. They may not know the man, but if you were a 70s, 80s, 90s movies fan, he did the poster art for that. And I actually grew up only about 10 miles down the road from where all of the magic he was creating up in Arrowhead, California, was happening. And I also admired uh, the concept work of Ralph McQuarrie, and also the illustrative work of the Hildebrandt brothers. And
Well, Macquarie, I know who he is. He's the guy who did sort of the pre-production visualizations for Star Wars.
yeah, the original Star Wars trilogy. He did all that. His work is amazing. And so I was uh, in my early teens and preteens when all of that was coming out, and I wanted involved to be involved in that in every way that I could think of, and I was really pushing for that. And life got in the way, and it never happened. But so from the time I left high school and after I got done with my own military, everything that you're seeing now is me having taught myself. I taught myself how to do illustration with the techniques that Drew Struzan does, with using gessoed illustration board and roughing out, a good clean sketch on the board, and then using acrylic washes, both hand painted and airbrushed, and then finishing up with color pencils and inks over the top of that, and maybe just a little bit more brushed acrylics. And I was doing that technique up until probably about 3-4 years ago, actually. And I transitioned into digital. I taught myself how to paint digitally in Photoshop, uh, and then started picking up Blender 3D kind of modeling and sculpting in this last year. And the reason I got into it was, well, that's the way things are now. No, very rarely is anybody accepting any traditional illustration work anymore. They want it digitally because you can go back in and rework it very fast. You don't have to start from scratch and make an original. Plus, you don't have to go through the whole process of having it photographed and then fixing it in Photoshop if anything needs fixing, and just and hand drawn, hand painted thumbnails. All of that. It's just the digital is so much more efficient and quicker, and now it just is going so fast. The tech is growing so fast now. It just really helps you as a concept artist and illustrator to have not only are you able to 3D model and sculpt, but if you can rig and animate your work, it's also a huge benefit to your portfolio as well. Otherwise, it's just like, if you don't stay on top of it, man, you get passed up so fast. And all of these young kids, that's what they're doing, and they're making these paintings and concept artworks. They're incorporating the 3D. They're throwing in photo bashing. They're doing everything and putting it in a very slick and polished and completed piece that it's not only so well done that you're immersed in it. It's very immersive art, but in most cases, you can't tell the difference between it and an actual photograph. You believe the environment or the subject matter that they created is real. And that's what the industry is looking for. And the industry, predominantly being now gaming industry, is really wanting that.
Now, you mentioned something. You've just been doing Blender for the last year. That might frustrate some people because, quite frankly, it looks like you've been doing it a lot longer than that. Looking at your work.
Oh well, thank you. Well, I'll just be out in the open about it. I am on the spectrum. I have Asperger's, and so what that means is when I have a subject of interest, from my own personal view, um, I will fixate on it, and I will absolutely just get on it over and over and over and over and over again. Um, Especially if I've got like an end goal where I want to be with a thing, I don't stop the whatever media it is medium that I'm using until I make it look at the level of my end goal, and then from there I start pushing it to go past that and make it my own. Um, So yeah, I officially started using Blender, and then polishing it up in Photoshop um, right around end of March, beginning of April. So not quite a year.
Oh man. Well, yeah, you were something of a savant with that software. It is pretty daunting. It's a complicated program. I do know a little bit. The versions I've got, I think, are a little bit older than the current versions. It's really been a few years since I spent a lot of time with it, but it's still useful. You'll see actually some of the graphics for this show I've done. Some of those I've done in Blender. Some over at my website I've done in Blender. Much simpler and less complicated than your stuff. But it's a very useful program. And how did you? There are a lot of 3D apps out there. I think I should mention that Blender is a freeware program, so it doesn't cost anything. There are quite a few programs out there that are pretty costly, but Blender is freeware. So was that part of the reasoning you decided to go with it? Or, I mean, it also does a lot too. So why don't you talk about the decision to go with Blender and how you came across it in the first place?
Well, first off, I, I'm broke as a joke artist. I mean, my work may look like $1 million, but man, that $1 million has not showed up at my door. But,
Sorry about that.
that's okay. I don't have a cough button either, Frank. Uh, so the reason why I went with Blender was first, yes, affordability. It's free, and I did my due diligence with it. I did a lot of research. I was comparing it with other programs like Autodesk Maya or Cinema 4D
Right,
or
right.
3ds Max, and a lot of those other programs, um, they each one have a particular strength, but it's not a strength that's so big that it like grossly outweighs the other programs. So for the most part, they have a pretty even playing field. Um, but programs like Autodesk Maya, they require a very steep um, kind of a annual renewal, uh, like a membership fee, and it's very
Okay.
expensive. The same with Photoshop. Now you can't get just a flat Photoshop, download it, and there you go. You have the program free and clear. You have to have a membership with it that you pay monthly, because they're constantly upgrading it and doing this and that. And I just don't do that. I use an old hack version of CS6, and I'm not limited by it because I'm not doing or wanting to do anything more than what the CS6 is providing right now. Basically use it for drawing and painting, or or finishing up or touching up a render that I've done on Blender, and that's about it. And I'm able to do just fine with it. I don't need any of the other stuff that's in Photoshop CC or anything like that. And also, Blender is very compatible now more than ever with Maya, which is basically the industry standard. All the effects houses like Weta, ILM, uh, and a couple others that I can rattle off are using those, and you're seeing Maya used in the major motion pictures. However, you're starting to see elements of Blender creep in there now because it can do some very, very cool things that are just as compatible with Maya. Basically, with Blender, you can start and finish an entire project. You can do your concept art, your storyboarding, your animation, your 3D modeling, your sculpting, and then your animation. And then you could take it and do sound design and edit your sound and basically edit together, splice together an entire film in Blender. It'll do all of it. It's got a video editor in it too. It's extremely powerful.
Are you doing any animations?
I was for a while, and then the business with YouTube kind of put a scare in me because I was a smaller channel, and with all this COPPA stuff that's come out, I didn't want to risk getting fined by the I guess it's the FFA, yeah, something like that. Anyways, there was language and noise to the effect of that if you didn't mark your channel a certain way, child friendly, family friendly, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and also if you marked it incorrectly, or if you marked your stuff as an adult station or an adult channel, and they found it to be family friendly, they could still fine you. And it was just like, it was so sketchy, so weird. I shut down my channel. So,
okay. Yeah, I have to deal with the same thing too, of course. I haven't found it to be that difficult, really, as far as I know, as far as I'm concerned. What we do here is not for kids. I mean, we get into some fairly dense things. We have scientists on it, witnesses, and so on. So. It's not directly for kids, but by the same token, it's not something that, let's say, an adult were sitting down and watching with a kid in the room, they would have to be concerned about it. It's just not designed for kids. I think that's what they're talking about there. Not one, you've got adult material that might be sensitive, and then you've got the stuff that is designed for children. And I think when they mean children, they're talking generally preteens. Is it like Teletubby or Sesame Street type material as compared with, is it going to be something that is going to raise an alarm if a kid is exposed to it? Yeah, I can't imagine anything that you're doing, unless you've got some art that I don't know about, or anything that we're doing here is going to raise an alarm if a small kid is in the room. But by the same token, it's not designed for kids. That's my understanding of it anyway.
Well, that's just it. Some of my artwork, by some people's perception, is very controversial.
Okay. I guess I didn't find any of that, so I wasn't aware of that.
Believe it or not, the alien ufology artwork is extremely controversial.
Okay.
I have received a lot of hate email and personal messages across all social media, claiming my stuff to be evil or satanic or just ridiculously attacked when I post it. That's why you'll see me cool off from it periodically. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I come back at it, and then sure as I do, I either get banned or it gets struck, or I get the hate messages. But because
you'll have to send me those pics, because I guess I didn't see them. Like I said, I don't see anything objectionable in anything that I've seen of your work.
You're seeing it. That's the funny thing. You're seeing it, Frank. You're already seeing it.
Okay. and
Yep.
people are having problems with it. Okay, understood.
Yeah, I get a lot of attacks from fundamental religious views. Um, it predominantly that. I'm not going to specifically outline that religion, but they're very clear about what religion they represent or what path they're on, and how their perception from that path is looking at my artwork, my creativity, and man, some of it has been threatening to say the least.
Wow, I was surprised to hear that. But you had mentioned, we talked a little bit before the show, excuse me, about what initially led you to pursue this particular genre of art, the space art. And you had mentioned that you did have some experiences. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I'll address the space art first. I have been a lifelong astronomy buff. I started my Carl Sagan collection of books back in the late 70s. I think the first Carl Sagan book I got was Broke His Brain. Um, and I had Murmurs of the Earth and Contact, of course, Cosmos. My parents actually let me skip school on the days that Cosmos aired, just so I wouldn't miss a single episode. I was a huge Carl Sagan fan, and I loved that he was able to take very complex, at the time, uh, planetary physics concepts and put them into layman's terms, very understandable language. And for an 11 through 13-year-old boy at the time, that's exactly what I needed, and it fueled my imagination. But as soon as Cosmos did come out, there was another um, concept artist and illustrator that he used prolifically, and I loved his art, and that was John Lomberg. And that began to influence some of my own interest in space art at the time. Um, and and as far as the ufology art, well, there's another lifelong. I am a lifelong experiencer. I haven't had any recent experiences, but there was a series of them that definitely um, had me obsessed with trying to get stolen memories or stuff I was not allowed to. I don't know. It's like a gate inside my head that won't let me go any further, and so I go through these fits where it feels like something more is coming on as far as the memories of the experiences are concerned, and I feel like if I just repaint or redraw from as many angles as I possibly can those events, more will come, and I will unlock that that block that's in my head. And before anybody asks, no, I won't do regressive hypnosis. I don't trust it. Um, it just I've got a couple of associates in the field that I have warned me against it, and so I stay away from it. And I just, if I am meant to have the rest of those memories, then it's meant to be. If I don't, I've gone as far as I can go with it.
Yep. Understood. Yeah, I actually would tend to agree with that. I've had some discussions from different witnesses who've been on this show or privately, and they've gone through that process. And I mean, at best, they were ambivalent. They didn't express any regret as far as doing it, but they didn't necessarily think it was all that beneficial either. So I'm not a big fan of the process. Knowing a little bit about hypnosis, of course, it's all about the power of suggestion. And if you've got somebody who's saying, especially if they're saying, yes, I'm an expert in these kind of alien encounter regressions, then what you're opening yourself up to is being led a little bit, I think, maybe a little bit too
That's
much.
exactly the problem. I have yet to, and I've watched a lot of hypnosis, just to explore just exactly that potential avenue of unlocking something. And I have yet to see just one, where the hypnotist is 100% objective and non-leading in their lines of inquiry while the patient is under. You have you have to be so exceedingly careful and so 2D in your presentation of the questions that you can't possibly even begin to paint a presumptuous picture inside the person who is under's head to feed off of to begin building a story of their own based on that question. And it's just like it's almost impossible to be objective.
Would you suggest art as a better way of exploring these type of experiences? Because I'm not sure in your timeline if which came first, sort of the chicken or the egg. Did the experiences come first, or you had mentioned your mom being an inspiration for you regarding the art? Did that come first, or was it the other way around? Or
The experiences first.
Okay.
Yeah, my first memory is an experience. I mean,
Okay.
I was still on a bassinet. Um, and I'll give you kind of a rough rundown of what an experience of mine was like. And my brother also experienced a lot of them with me, as well as, yeah. In short, I would have thought I was entirely crazy had I not had witnesses on several occasions to experience these things with me. So I haven't written myself off as entirely crazy. Um, so a typical experience would be it starts off very paranormal, and it's always in the middle of the night, somewhere between 1:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And um, it starts off with like, but I can feel the bed shaking, and we always slept in bunk beds in a little tiny bedroom, my brother and I. And I would start off always thinking, it's my brother just adjusting in his sleep. And then there would be inanimate objects around the room suddenly moving by themselves. A book would fly off the shelf, or uh, the chair would fall over backwards. There's nobody else in the room. It's a tiny room. It's like a little 8 by 12. Lived in a trailer park inside a park residence. Um, and then what I would call the chatterers, the whisperers, they would start up. This kind of like almost guttural sounds or languages of like 2 or 3 entities having a discussion, and I'm not included, within earshot. It kind of sounded like it'd be like 2 or 3 of them like that, and you could stand right in the middle of it, but you can't quite pick out what is being said. And then so now you're immersed in this. You got the weird objects moving around, and then the disembodied voices and things like that. And now you're terrified, but your attention is right there. It's almost like it was a calculated distraction to get you to pay attention to this while they arrive, because all of a sudden, when it's all too late and you're fully engulfed in this and you can't wake up anybody else in the house, they're dead asleep. You could shake them. Mom and dad won't wake up. My brother won't wake up. I'm nudging their shoulder. I'm moving their head. I'm yelling. They won't wake up. It's just me. And then while all that's going on, in an instant, every window in the house is flooded with this electric searing blue light. And I'm out. I'm gone. And only on a handful of occasions have I actually seen faces, bodies. And I don't ever remember being in a craft. I would swear that I was underground or in a cave, because it always smelled like wet rock. It was musty, just very dank. And I don't recall ever seeing, gleaming walls full of flashing tech and lights or anything like that. It was dark. It was me on a round, what looked like a stainless steel table, face down, and then I'm unable to move, and I see those faces coming at me like they're gliding, not even walking. You don't see heads bobbing like they're walking. I just see them like gliding toward me, and then that's it. Memory's gone.
Okay. And the faces that you saw, are they pretty similar to what we see in your art?
Yeah, I've done two versions. I've done the nice version, which you see, the more kind of cutesy, almost adorable looking gray, but the more menacing looking grays, like I've done in the pictures, trio and quintetto, and used that one prolifically. Um, that's exactly what I remember. Those faces right there.
And I've got one more question for you about this. In conversations I've had in the past, I've heard accounts where there's sort of different levels of reality. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say our normal everyday reality, like at least what I'm going through right now as I'm sitting here talking to you, and hopefully roughly the same on your end, maybe being like an 8. But I've also heard descriptions of a hyper reality, somehow a little bit more real than real. So, calling this reality that you and I are experiencing at this moment an 8, would you be able to put on a scale of 1 to 10 what kind of experience, what level of reality did this experience take place? If that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, I put it at a 20.
Oh, okay, okay.
And I'll tell you why. It's because of the extraordinary, hyper intense nature of the experience itself. I mean, everything about it is something that is outside of the norm of our day to day 3D existence. It, everything that you're witnessing and experiencing and hearing defies all known laws of physics. And it's very confusing, it's very disorienting, because the very second just one element of these things is happening, your mind is automatically trying to find a place within itself that makes sense, and you can't. And then next thing you know, you've got 6, 7, maybe a dozen of these elements that are nonsensical and breaking these laws of physics happening all at once, and you're just completely overwhelmed and bombarded, and you it's almost like you submit and acquiesce as a line of defense just to not lose yourself entirely. Uh, and but yeah, it is in your face. It's almost like it's inside you and outside you simultaneously, and you cannot for the life of you figure out why or how.
Okay. Anything else you want to add before I start getting back into the 3D stuff?
Nah, that's good enough.
Okay, okay. Now, I know it's common for people to have experiences, to have this compulsion, I guess, might be at least one word. There might be a better one, but I'll call it compulsion just for the sake of moving the conversation along. But they feel compelled to sort of recreate artistically their experience. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you've got any thoughts. I mean, let's face it, we live in a digital age. The digital option is one. I mean, yeah, I suppose you could do it with, a paint or a pencil or crayon or whatever the case may be on paper and take a photograph of it and spread it around that way. But do you have any advice for folks who might feel compelled to sort of recreate or illustrate their experiences, and how to get started with all that?
Uh, well, yes. First off, be mindful of the obsession. Um, in my previous marriage, I drove my first wife absolutely crazy. I spent the whole of the 90s as see a lot of these memories started showing up as nightmares in the middle of the night, dreams. I started remembering in my dreams because I didn't have the memories right after the incident. In many of the events, some I did, but many of them I didn't have the ability to remember a portion of what had happened until I was dreaming it. Like I'd be 25, 26 years old. I filled 3 portfolios full of pencil drawings and ink drawings of these events that I would just draw over and over and over, kind of like the gal in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, who kept drawing and painting the Devil's Tower and hanging it all over her wall. That was me with these events. And I would draw. I just draw the same thing over and over and over again. And in some ways, it's more subtle to you from the viewer's perception because it's 3D, because I can rotate around the view, and it's not, I'm not stuck in a 2D format. So basically, you're still seeing that the same scenarios, the same events over and over and over again. Only I might change the background, I might change the lighting a little bit, or I might look at it from the side instead of directly face on this time. But it's the same thing over and over again. Still trying to jar something, to open up that damn gate, lock, block, wall, something. And I recommend, though, if you're with somebody, they either have to be extremely understanding, and I'm saying this more for the family view, not from the artist or creative's view, because I already know that you could be doing this, and you lose all sense of time. You lose all sense of spatial relationship in your surroundings. You could be at something for 5 hours involving this stupid obsession, and it feels like 30 seconds to you. Meanwhile, your family hasn't seen you, and maybe you haven't showered or eaten or anything. You're just and they're the ones that are paying, not you. You're just being silently crazy while they're witnessing all of this and wanting a normal life, and you're not giving it to them. You're this
right.
weird.
That is, I think you raise an excellent point, because I think that is, and obviously I've got a lot of friends who are into all this, and it's not so much the subject per se, but the time that that it can chew up. And that is the issue, I think, in terms of a lot of personal difficulties I've heard about, that it's just chewing up too much time and taking away from other things that are also very important, obviously.
Oh, yeah. It's not nice to close friends and family at all. If you allow yourself to fall down that freaking rabbit hole, walk through Alice's mirror, and you don't even care. You're just lost in it, and you just, I don't know. You feel like you're in the storm instead of being smart and taking the objective viewpoint above the storm, so that you can not only see the storm, but all of those involved by its impact. And you can't do that when you're so in the middle of the storm that you become the storm itself. And that is not good, like I said, for your family, close friends, or possibly even your job. You don't stop talking about it. You don't stop doing things. It's like an addict with cigarettes, all your friends that you make are fellow smokers. And why? Because you know that you're going to run out of cigarettes in that pack, and they're going to bum you one when you're down on your luck and you need that cigarette. So everything that you do and all the associations you make are revolved around the habit. Well, this is very similar, and you just have to be mindful of that, and don't let yourself sink into it.
Yep. And thanks for reminding me it's time for me to light up. Hang on a sec, Erik. But getting back to getting started with all this, if somebody's had an experience or just a sighting that hasn't maybe impacted them that deeply, but they still had a sighting, as far as getting started in attempting to recreate the experience, any suggestions on that?
Yeah, there's several freeware programs. If you don't want to go and because art's expensive. You can go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby, and you'll discover right away that pencils, paper, all of that is extremely expensive. So I recommend, just like getting a freeware paint program, and you use your phone, a tablet, your desktop, whatever, and just start doodling away. Don't even try to get details right off the bat. Try to more express feeling with tone and shape and lighting, and eventually something will click and it'll feel right, and the details show up naturally. And of course, practice begets habit, habit begets personality, personality begets lifestyle, and then destiny. So there's a course of actions that have to be taken with anything that you want to get good at or be able to do well. The old crawl before you run aspect of things. But that if you're wanting to seek, like I did, I went through that obsessive period of wanting to get more answers that I know are locked up in there. You could just feel them. I would go about it that way. I would get just a simple draw and paint program. Most computers and tablets show up with them pre-installed, and just get to doodling, hashing it out, and I recommend don't look at anybody else's case. Don't look at other pictures. You focus on yours. You focus on what you feel. You focus on, and I really stress the emotional aspect of it, because that's where the details are. When you ask somebody to describe something that's sweetness and light and makes them feel good, there's not a lot of detail there. They usually just tell you it's very bright and colorful, and it's more of a feeling in that regard. But you ask that person to create something that is fearful, and every single time, that's when all of the sharp, drooly fangs and nasty teeth and the mange and fur and stench, and you could smell it. All that detail comes out in fear-based imagery. So it depends on their experience. I'm not saying that everybody had a bad experience. Mine were traumatic. I did not have the happy kumbaya, going by my weight in djembe, sit around a campfire, ET experiences. I'm not even convinced that they were ET. I just know that they didn't look like me, and I don't know. I'm still stuck in I don't know.
I think it's important that you don't have to develop the talent that Erik Stitt has just to provide an illustration that helps people understand what you saw and what you went through. It's a form of communication.
The reason why that's important is because it is, up until that point, a memory. And that's just kind of like this pithy aspect floating around in their cranium, their psyche. And when they begin to pencil it or paint it, and it's something they can hold in their hands. Now they can touch it, they could see it, and they could show it to others. It in that regard, it is now real. This is a thing that is tangible and relatable, whereas you're trying to convey it through words from your thought cloud to another. More often than not, you just come across crazy. You may still come across crazy, when you've got it on a drawing or painting, but at least your crazy looks cool now.
Right. And what you're saying kind of reminds me of the old adage: "A picture's worth 1,000 words."
Exactly.
And that might be conservative.
It's very conservative, because if you and the more accurately you're portraying your memory, the more accurately you're portraying your experience in whatever medium you're choosing to portray it in, the more apt that you're able to accurately have that same emotion and feeling in the viewer you're showing it to. And now, like you, that viewer is left with no choice how to feel when they see the imagery you've created. Whereas that's very hard to do with words.
Got it. Do you have anything else for the folks listening in? Anything else you want to talk about?
If they like what I do and either want to experience some of my creativity themselves, I've got my Facebook art page at facebook.com/Erik Stitt. And then I have my portfolio page is at erikstittart.net. And then, of course, I have a Patreon where I create hundreds of wallpapers, and you will find hundreds of wallpapers there in space and sci-fi art. And you can get in for as low as $1 a month and have access to all of them for only $1 a month. You can pay more and get some discounts on prints and whatnot.
Oh, you do the prints. Okay. How big are the prints?
As big as you want, because I have it set up on print on demand sites. So you can go as small as an 11 by 17 or a postcard, or you can blow it up to a 24 by 36 if you want.
There you go.
Yeah. And that's on patreon.com /Erik Stitt.
Okay. And what I will do is I will make sure that those links are in the description for this particular video. It will definitely have that, and hopefully send some business your way. Erik, I sure do appreciate your taking time on a Sunday to chat with us. It was fantastic, and obviously we'd be happy to have you back any old time.
Sounds great, Frank. I enjoyed it. You're a great guy. And sorry I missed Miss Chant. And,
yep.
I wish
she'll be back. She'll be back. She'll be back for sure. Okay. Well, Erik, thanks again. You have a great day, and I've got to be moving along here. So thanks again. It was a fantastic interview. It was great having you.
All right, Frank.
Thank you, sir.
Next time. See ya.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and that was Erik Stitt talking about his art and his experiences. And let's go now to discuss something that happened Friday night. There was a bit of a blow up over on Twitter. Some UFO folks who are following Diana Pasulka, who is the author of American Cosmic, and she's been a guest on the show. Let's see, when was it? It was about a year ago. It was actually about a year ago when she came on, and we discussed in depth her book American Cosmic, and of course she's been involved quite a bit with some of the scientists who either are or have been, or perhaps a link removed from the TTSA organization, Tom DeLonge's organization involved in the UFOs. And obviously there's a little bit of doubt as to whether or not these tweets came directly from her, but let's go through them now. And this is what came about. And there's Diana at the Vatican, and there's Diana again, and there's the cover of her book. But let's get through this really quickly here. And what she basically again, there's some controversy as to whether or not these tweets came directly from her or if she was hacked. Now, let's see, obviously a shot at Tom DeLonge here. I hired a person to write his books on the topic. I researched and wrote my own. He is a Mason. I'm a Jewish Irish genocide survivor. I have a lot to lose. TDL does not. I know all of us scientists. They are defecting, and they should. Now, Let's go through some of the other tweets. Why should they defect? What's the issue? Scientists are generally stand-up types of people. TTSA is a psyop. The scientists are figuring this out and leaving. Obviously, the psyop word, it's a bit of a loaded expression, but basically, let's put the word psyop aside. It is, in fact, been pretty well known that the TTSA approach is not universally embraced by some folks in the scientific community. Then she goes on a little more. Basically, my issue is they are using media technologies to target children to believe their narrative. I have no idea if TDL has kids, but this is so uncool. And of course, this gets into basically the TTA narrative, which is, of course, and we've got Lou Elizondo's resignation letter from the government before he joined TTSA. And in summation, I think this pretty well. I'm going to pull this up here now. And so I can read it because obviously it's a little bit small on the print in the software I'm looking at. So I've got to pull it up separately. Let's see here. Yeah, basically, from the letter, despite overwhelming evidence at both the unclassified and classified levels, certain individuals in the department remain staunchly opposed to further research on what could be a tactical threat to our pilots, sailors, and soldiers, and perhaps even an existential threat to our national security. So that is an issue with some folks. They don't like the threat angle. Basically, I've been critical of it myself, and it's been discussed here on the show on numerous occasions. The fear porn angle that UFOs, ETs are a threat. And of course, that is obviously not shared in every circle. That is certainly not the case. And also the fact that they're involved in credas with the military, and that it's thought in some circles that that in fact compromises them in terms of what. The elephant in the room here is, let's face it, some UFOs are extraterrestrial, and not everyone is on the same page as far as presenting them as a threat. A lot of folks view them as an opportunity. There are some scientists who've been involved in TTSA who have had these experiences, and as a result of these experiences, have been able to bring home the bacon, so to speak. They've gotten ideas or generated ideas that have led to positive breakthroughs for humanity. So that is the angle they're coming from, and it is a conflict behind the scenes. There's no question about that. Regardless of whether those tweets came directly from Dr. Pasulka or not, that is the case. It has been the case for some time that there is some conflict there behind the scenes. Some scientists simply don't like the TTSA approach. They simply don't like the threat angle, the fear porn angle, which we've been critical of here for some time, and they don't like the fact that TTSA is fairly openly trying to climb aboard the military-industrial complex contractor gravy train, and that is an issue. There are some people who don't want to touch this. Obviously, with the 10-foot pole, they're getting very caught up in the rather loaded word psyop, and that there's no evidence of this. There's no question about it. This conflict is the case. TTSA has had at least a couple of defections. People who were working with them in the past are no longer working with them. Notably, Gary Nolan, who left them towards, I guess, maybe the spring or early summer of last year. And then more recently, Colm Kelleher has left as well. So this is something that we should be mindful of. And it raises an important question that we really should be all debating. We just heard from Erik, who had a very negative experience, which is maybe a little bit ironic that we had him on the show today. But there are some others, the experiences aren't so negative. We've had Ray Hernandez Hernandez on, who's talked about his experience, apparently a positive one, that the Free organization did a survey with thousands of respondents. Again, the results neutral to very positive, overwhelming majority. That was the response there. So this is something that should not be swept under the rug, that shouldn't be passed over without some comment and further debate. This is something that we're going to have to come to grips with. And certainly there are some people over on Twitter who don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole, who are setting themselves up as knowledge centers for this. And if they're stepping away from this, frankly, that is a gutless move, to be perfectly honest about it. This is something that you can't shy away from. We've got to discuss it. My own feeling is that this ET UFO phenomenon provides us all with a tremendous opportunity. An advanced extraterrestrial civilization visiting us. That is extraordinary and should not be viewed as an existential threat. I think that's a ridiculous exaggeration. There are, of course, plenty of accounts where the results aren't as positive. But be that as it may, we should still move forward, and we should still be continuing to look at all this, but it should not be within the context that this phenomenon is in any way, shape, or form an existential threat, because there is simply no evidence for that. So that is a very brief synopsis of what went on. Again, the position here is whether or not Dr. Pasulka did in fact issue those tweets. I've good reason to believe that she was not hacked, but regardless, whether she was hacked or not, the tweets that were sent on Friday night do indicate that there is this debate going on privately. And my key point here is, yes, that is a fact. There's no question about that. This has been known for quite some time. And this also, we should be debating this strongly, no matter how strong you support TTSA. And I can't deny that this show wouldn't exist, that a lot of other things that have happened in the field and for the field have happened over the last 2 years as a specific result of what they're working towards. But we can also applaud that and still at the same time stand up and be critical of this existential threat narrative that is also a fact. So that's that. I'm going to wrap things up. Hopefully this debate continues. If it does, we're going to be covering it. We'll cover it in more detail. We'll have guests, and Chant will be back to throw her 2 cents in and all that. Thanks again to Erik Stitt for joining us, and we will be back. I am going out on a limb and predicting that February is going to be a big month for us all. We'll have a lot to chew over, so get rested and be ready to jump back in when we come back and talk to you next week. Thanks a lot, everybody. You have a great day. Bye-bye now.